Bartholomew Town is brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online, Navigant Credit Union, the Audubon Society of Rhode Island, Newport Film, and Half Street Group.
Bartholomew Town.
So we're about to approach the 1-year anniversary of a day that will probably go down as the beginning of one of the biggest, if not the biggest, news story, not only of the year here in Rhode Island and southern New England, and really it extends out to the megapolis. The entire region is impacted by this story, but it may very well be one of, if not the biggest story of the decade, and certainly something that from a political standpoint and from a trust in government standpoint will resonate for quite some time. And that, of course, is the Washington Bridge. Anybody who is in Rhode Island, you'd have to be literally under a rock to not be aware of the situation out there. But now there's been sort of a trickle of concern about the status of the open eastbound side. For anybody who's not familiar, the Washington Bridge, it's essentially a series of bridges. It's the westbound span and the eastbound span are separate superstructures. It's the westbound span that was abruptly closed last December. They said it was because, at first a truck went over it, a heavy truck, and then all of a sudden a young engineer happened to find out that the bridge was in critical failure. We've learned a lot more about that in the last year. But now, as you have twice as much vehicular traffic going over the eastbound span, it's become a bi-directional bypass. There's been increasing concern about the short and long-term health of that eastbound span. Casey Jones is an engineer who has an incredibly in-depth YouTube channel assessing different infrastructure projects and has been digging into the Washington Bridge and offering expertise. Casey joins us this morning, and let me ask you right out of the gate, if you haven't inspected the bridge yourself, you haven't been on the ground as far as I know, but from your standpoint, give us what you assess to be the condition of the open eastbound span that's serving as a two-direction bypass right now.
Certainly, Bill. Thanks for having me. Well, interestingly, I had a conversation with Tim White at WPRI. Mm-hmm. And I shared with him the inspection reports that I obtained from Rhode Island DOT through a public information request. And surprisingly, he said he had made the same request previously and was denied entirely. And whether somebody was filling in that day, substitute records procure and send them out when somebody else would have put the kibosh on it. I don't know, but I got quite an assortment of documents that include inspection of the bridge superstructure, the part you can see above ground, and as well as some underwater inspections of the piers. And so what struck me, and I just presented that information. I only just got it. I wanted to get it out there because I didn't see. Well, first of all, let me just step back. I'm not a structural engineer. I'm a geotechnical engineer, but I've done almost exclusively bridge work for the last 25 years. I test bridge foundations during construction. So I'm around bridge construction all the time. My clients are bridge contractors for the most part. So I'm in this industry. And so what struck me about the photos associated with these inspections reports was how there were so many issues for such a young bridge. Corrosion, spalling of concrete, cracked concrete. All bridges have some kind of issues or something you can notice and note during an inspection. But there were some things such as missing bolts or bearing plates that show movement and bolts that are sideways on the mounting of the bearing plate to the bridge pier. So it just raises an overall question. The bridge is in what they call fair condition, which is middle of the pack. And keep in mind, this bridge was redone in nearly its entirety. It appears they reused the substructure. For the most part, they had to put in a new drill shaft foundation on each pier. But by and large, they used the existing eastbound bridge foundation that was built in 1930. So when they redid it in 2008, this is supposed to last for 75 years. And so if you look at these photos and some of the issues, I only asked for records going back the last 10 years. So I got some information from 2015 on. And even years ago, they were showing these issues. So they looked to me to be a combination of issues that existed during construction as well as things that developed over time. And certainly the photos show a lack of maintenance or full proper maintenance, which led to the demise of the westbound bridge.
Right. And I think there's several concerns. I mean, obviously there's the initial concern of, hey, wait a second, we've got more traffic, more vehicular traffic going over this span than we ever have had by nature of the fact that it's now serving two directions of motor vehicle traffic. But then you ask the question, okay, they said that they're going to put on a weight monitoring system. That's something that actually we first reported here on BartholomewTownRIPodcast.com that was coming, but it hasn't been engaged yet. They haven't turned the thing on. So there's really, from that standpoint, not clear exact data as to what's happening every day. So the question becomes, is this span safe, and how long will it remain? If it is safe, how long will it remain both safe, and from a practical and economic and infrastructural standpoint, how much time do we have before, let's say, the westbound span, they do get a contractor and they do rebuild it? How long until we have to do the same thing over again on the eastbound span? So those are some of the looming questions. I know it's a lot. And again, just from your vantage point, it's difficult to make an exact assessment, but your gut instinct right now, based on years of expertise as to the longevity of the eastbound span and the immediate safety.
Yeah, I don't want to be alarmist here. I want to touch back on what you started this segment with, and that is really the Rhode Island DOT and Peter Alviti in particular has made statements that are clearly untrue about what led to the closure of the westbound bridge. That's what caught my eye. This is unusual. And then it was what I call, from a content creation standpoint, the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, they just kept making one bumbling move or statement after the other. So the thing that concerns me is, yeah, you can see inspection photos and say, yeah, that doesn't look exactly right. But if isn't full transparency, and you've got people in leadership positions making what I consider to be misleading statements, and I could back that up. I mean, Alviti early on back in December tried to assert that this anchor rod was not broken in July because they had inspected it in July. And then it was, a heavily overloaded truck crossed. Well, there was no evidence of that. I was just thrown out there. And he used the words, I have been told, this, that, and the other. Well, the guy's a degreed engineer from what I understand. And as an engineer, you're supposed to take information and process it and make critical assessments. And then you don't just parrot what somebody happens to tell you that's politically expedient. So I would say in terms of the eastbound, what strikes me is that there's some things that are surprising to me for such a young bridge. But I did get a copy of their interim evaluation engineering report for putting extra traffic on the eastbound bridge. Tim White was kind enough to send that to me, but it was an interim report. It was almost, quick and dirty. This is what we think, you're okay. And then they said, we'll continue with the normal, full-fledged assessment in the coming days. Well, why didn't they send that? And then I think it was April, Alviti alluded to having two other companies assess the viability of having increased amount of traffic on the eastbound bridge. Where are those reports? So again, if the bridge is in good shape, great, let everybody know. If you've had other people evaluate putting extra traffic on it, put those reports out. They have a website. They're really selective about what they post on it. Put it all out there, the things that are being asked in the media.
It makes almost no sense given that they claim to have had two outside engineering firms assess the viability of the eastbound span. You would think that would lead any efforts to communicate with the general public. As you said, those documents aren't available to the general public for whatever reason. And look, this is a communications effort from the Department of Transportation that has been, they've assigned dates certain that have come and gone without any action, and they have repeatedly kind of stepped on their own foot. And you look at this story and you know that this goes back who knows how far. It's something that is probably multiple administrations back, but now it falls into the lap of Governor Dan McKee. He seems tied up, at least legally speaking, in terms of if he dismisses Alviti, all of a sudden the lawsuits that they're engaged in against 13 contractors are in jeopardy because the attorneys for those contractors are going to say, well, you terminated your director of the Department of Transportation. You must have X percentage of culpability. So you've got a scenario where I have deemed this to be, and I think other journalists and probably civilians have deemed it to be almost like a rogue Department of Transportation that, they just try to play it off as, well, these things happen and yeah, you're all set. Just trust us. Meanwhile, if you polled people, I guarantee trust in the DOT has never been lower.
Well, we're in a different era now with social media. And these organizations, like what I see with Rhode Island, have grown accustomed to being able to snowball to mislead people, particularly if there's any technical content. And it's hard, I don't expect members of the media to be conversant in engineering principles. But you sense a lot of times when they're asking questions, they know it's not quite right, but they have to almost accept the answer and maybe don't have a good follow-up because they're not in that industry. And that's what I'm trying to address with my channel. But as far as, I've commented on previous videos, I think it was a huge mistake to go after all these people involved with the westbound bridge. It poisoned the well for getting future work, getting any kind of cooperation. Max Wistow, in his meeting with Savage and the media, announcing that they're sending letters to all these firms who they subsequently filed lawsuits against, was asked, if anybody's going to look at the DOT. And Wistow goes, well, pretty much why? The DOT staff doesn't have money. It just like blows my mind. So are you about principles and doing the right thing and getting these bridges open as quickly as possible and safely as possible? Or are you just about the money and political cover?
Yeah. And the lack of significant, really, we had one joint oversight session here in terms of our General Assembly, House of Representatives and Senate. They had one joint oversight committee, a hearing, and it was early on in the process. Apparently there is going to be some effort to do that again. There's no inspector general in Rhode Island. So from the standpoint of an ombudsman or anybody looking at this thing, it does come down to the media. It reminds me of the early days of COVID, not so much as things moved along, but where you had a room full of people who had almost no experience or idea what they were talking about, myself included, when it comes to infectious diseases, every single day questioning the Department of Health or the governor's office or whoever it may be, and really relying on expertise from the outside to formulate their questions. But in real time, when you're in the room, it's difficult to assess the viability or reasonability of an answer because you're not a medical doctor. You're not an infectious disease expert. Certainly hard to compare COVID and the bridge, but at the same time, they have become accustomed to just sort of dismissing the media as, well, these guys don't know what they're talking about. And so we can sort of use a word salad or obfuscate certain things and kind of move on with our day. But people are getting restless. And boy, if there ever was a time where you would think that the Department of Transportation from a communication standpoint would say, let's redo this thing. Let's try to re-engage the public and earn back trust. It would be now. Yet here we are with this eastbound span where no one really knows what's happening.
Yeah, and going back to what I said earlier, I'm not trying to be alarmist. I see issues with how they're conducting themselves, the lack of transparency, and it becomes all the more critical given that this is the only way across the river on I-195. So it's like there's no room for error here. And this is an organization that's made many, many errors. So they just need to, I think, in their own best interest, come clean, share what they know, what they don't know, if there's any concerns, and just tackle it head on. I mean, I know that sounds easy, but the way they've been doing it isn't working too well for them.
No question. You've got an incredible YouTube channel with a significant audience, and you do a great job of breaking down not only this project but other projects. It's good for the general news consumer. It's good for the journalist. It's good for anybody in government to observe, because again, each situation with a bridge or infrastructure problem is different for different reasons. But there are ways to start to learn about the basics of this arena, so to speak, from your channel. Specifically with the Washington Bridge, specifically on the eastbound span, you go 20 minutes in depth pointing out some of the very real problems that are in front of us. I would encourage everybody to immediately search for your YouTube channel and subscribe and follow that. What's the best way to do that for people in terms of a keyword to type?
Casey Jones, professional engineer.
Yep. It's a great resource. Last couple of minutes here. It's one of those scenarios where, like you said, and I appreciate that. I think it's really important to not be alarmist here, because there are so many people who traverse that span, myself included, every day. You don't want people fearing that the bridge is imminently going to collapse or something like that. But how does this project compare, or this situation compare, to other things that you've seen around the country in terms of the maintenance for, or the condition for, a bridge of its age, as compared with other states or other projects, bridge or otherwise?
Well, unfortunately for Rhode Island, they're near the bottom in terms of number of bridges that have, they've got the most bridges, the highest percentage of bridges that are deficient or in poor condition. And I know they've been trying to work on that and improve that. But again, you see the 16-year-old bridge with clear maintenance issues, clogged drains and corrosion and all these other things. And it's, there's a general tendency across the country to spend money on, exciting new construction and never maintain it. Just, it's better to deal with the emergency than the routine stuff. It just, so, from my perspective, I worked with a number of DOTs, through the contractors. And in many DOTs, you can see evidence of arrogance or, hey, we know better than you. But this is on steroids in Rhode Island, based on my experience.
Casey Jones, make sure everybody, you go and subscribe to that YouTube channel, Casey Jones, professional engineer. You don't want to miss it, because nobody else is able to provide that kind of, or I should say, no one else is providing that kind of in-depth breakdown. It's phenomenal. And if you care about this project and the everything surrounding it, it's a must watch. Thanks so much for your time today.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Great talking with you.
Hey, Bill Bartholomew here. I got a great education at the University of Rhode Island. It's something that I use every day in all of my work. And now the University of Rhode Island, if you haven't heard, they're offering a wide array of programs online. That's right, URI Online. Check it out at uri.edu/online, or give them a call, 401-874-5280. I can't thank the University of Rhode Island enough for the outstanding education that they provided me. They're one of the best universities in the Northeast, public or otherwise. Give them a call, 401-874-5280. That's 401-874-5280, and learn about the University of Rhode Island online. You want to talk about longevity? Take a look at Navigant Credit Union. As Rhode Island's first ever member-owned credit union, Navigant Credit Union has been a staple in the local business community for more than 108 years. That's right. Today, Navigant's a $3.4 billion institution serving more than 136,000 members across 25 physical branch locations. But since its founding in 1915, the mission has never changed. Navigant Credit Union's team of financial professionals have remained committed to improving the financial well-being of the families, businesses, and communities they serve across Rhode Island. Learn more at navigantcu.org. Hey, thanks for stopping by Bartholomew Town. For more content, follow me on Instagram at Bill Bartholomew.